Okay, let's go on and we'll take a look at the actual EEOC questions. So she was prepared, and they are going to ask, when you were hired, your title, your supervisor, when did they require you to get the jab? Or I'm sorry, when did they tell you to get the jab? And what was your deadline? When were you denied your accommodation? Remember, an accommodation is an adjustment to your work. It's a compromise. They want you to do this. You don't want to do this. So you have to come to an agreement. And you need to offer that. You need to say, here's what I'm willing to do. And mostly it's like, I'm willing to work exactly as I have been all this time. Did they give you a different accommodation? And what was the date? And did they terminate you? You do not need to wait until you've been terminated in order to file with the EEOC. You do it with every instance of discrimination. Every time they discriminate against you, you file another complaint, just like sexual harassment. If you're sexually harassed again and again, you're filing complaints all along. And there's no deadline on your religious exemption. Your employer saying, oh, well, the deadline for you to put in for your exemption is Wednesday. No, it's not. There's no such thing as a deadline on your rights. That would be like your employer saying, well, we're not taking any more sexual harassment complaints. You had to do that in February. Oh, my goodness. All right. In our religious exemption program, our concierge program, I recommend that everybody keeps a detailed record from the get-go, everything. When did they tell you had to do this? What were the back and forths? Who said what? Especially if other people are making snide remarks about you or others and their religious beliefs. Remember, this has nothing to do with your medical status. This is your religious belief. If you're like me, and I worship God by keeping my blood pure, I'm never going to participate. It's not a matter of medical status. It is my religious practice, and that's protected by law. So you've got to keep it always in the realm of religious persecution, because that's all it is. Now, when you give your information to your employer, you don't have to belong to any particular religion. The EEOC is asking you what you told your employer. Let's be clear on that. They're asking you, what did you tell your employer? Did you say it was a religious belief and not a medical belief or a personal belief or something? Now, in some states, like Texas and Utah, the state laws allow for personal exemptions, your own personal belief. I'm speaking about the federal government. All right. I'm speaking about the federal law that applies to every state. No state is exempt from this law. Okay, so they want to know, the EEOC wants to know, what did you tell your employer was the reason for your claim? And how long have you had this belief or performed this religious practice? Well, I've done it my entire life. Some people say for as long as they can remember. Now, this is interesting. This is not a requirement for you to be exempt. No one has to know about your belief at all in order for you to be exempt. Don't get bamboozled here. The reason why the EEOC is asking is they want to collect evidence for your claim. And if there are a dozen people that are like, oh, I know she's always telling me Bible verses and she never cusses, and she invites me to go to Bible study, and I know she goes to this church. It's not required, but it doesn't hurt for you to have that for your claim. How did you tell them? Did you email them? Did you make a comment? Again, this is not required, but I would be polite with the EEOC questions. All right. And then they're going to ask you about your religious belief. You're going to tell them, and you're going to say, my job is requiring me to be at work. Or no, that's not the requirement. The requirement is my job is requiring me to do this, and I don't want to do this because God told me not to. Does your employer know about the conflict? Now, I've spoken about this at length in all of my videos. There are two things that need to be done. Number one, you need to notify your employer. So those of you that are like, I'm not doing it and they can't make me, well, then go get fired or whatever. But the law says you have to notify them. It doesn't have to be in writing, but I would keep a record of it. It's just like you would notify your employer if you're not going to show up at work on Monday because you've got a dentist appointment, or you're just not going to show up at work. In most cases, you're going to notify your employer. So you're notifying them. And they're asking, how did you do it? When did you do it? Remember, the respondent is your employer. What did you tell them? This is really important, and some of you guys are flubbing it, if I can use that old-fashioned word. You're flubbing it. You're not telling them what you want for your accommodation. You need to tell them. You need to say, I'm going to keep my body pure. I'm not going to do this. And I will continue to work exactly as I have been. I'll do a symptom screening. I'll stay home if I'm sick. I won't cough on anybody. I'll stay 6 feet apart. I'll, whatever. Tell them what you're willing to do. And some of you are not being accommodated because you never said it. You've got to offer it. And then otherwise your employer can say, well, we didn't know. So don't leave anything to chance. Here again, who did you tell? What did you tell them? What did your employer say when you told them, here's how you want to work? All right. Now, what was the harmful action taken against you? That is the discrimination. You were put on unpaid leave. You were told you couldn't go to the company meeting. They increased how much you had to pay for healthcare. And get this, what they're doing now is, we're not increasing your healthcare. We're just giving everybody else a discount. Discrimination. You have to be treated equally. You can't be treated differently because of your religious belief. That would be like all of the Muslims have to pay more for their healthcare. You guys don't fall for it. And then what happened? Were you terminated? Were you put on unpaid leave? Were you threatened? Were you coerced? Were you harassed? Was it a hostile work environment? You have to have all of this written down and keep a record of it all the time. Now, this is interesting because they're gathering information, and the EEOC is trying to find out whether or not your accommodation would result in more than a minimal hardship. Remember, it's not just no hardship. Your employer is bound by law to accommodate you, even if it's a hardship. Minimal hardship means, okay, we'll put you in your own office or whatever. We'll let you work from home. How can that be a hardship you've been doing all this time? Now, if you're asking for your own office to be built, your own elevator, a chauffeur to drive you to and from work, your own cafeteria, and your own 5-star chef, that might be a hardship. But all this other stuff that it's a hardship, they have to prove it. And I mean, prove it. That's different than saying. That's different than, hypothetical. What happened? What would your employer say they did? Sounds a little strange. When you asked for this religious accommodation. Okay, what did they do? Are you represented by an attorney? How did you learn about filing with the EEOC? I would put the Healthy American. Are you aware of others filing complaints for the same reason as you? PCP is the principal charging party. That is you. What is your position? Okay. Does your employer have a policy in writing? Do you have a copy? I would also add a copy of their non-discrimination policy, your employer's non-discrimination policy. How much time, I love this one. How much time is your employer providing to you to submit the documents? Some of your employers are like, I need it tomorrow. And then you give it to them and you don't hear from them for 6 months. It's ridiculous. That's coercion. That's a hostile work environment. So it should be a reasonable amount of time. Is your employer requesting that you provide documentation? If yes, what are they requesting? Is your employer granting any exceptions to their written policy of the this or other things? And who has been granted this exception? That would be good to know. One of my smells like something's fishy at Wells Fargo, smells like Wells. One of my VIP clients that works there told me that she knows for a fact that one of her colleagues who has the identical role, the same exact position, was accommodated for a medical reason to keep working from home. And they told my client that it was a hardship for her to keep working from home. It's a slam dunk case.